right. Um, how is the Samurai Brotherhood different than other men's groups?
Well, I mean, speaking from, I can only speak from my personal experience with the men's groups that I've been involved in. I would say in some respects it's different, other respects it's not. It's what all men's groups are ultimately about, which is that sense of just sharing ground with each other. What I try to bring to this one is a combination of a few factors. Some of the communities I was part of in the early 90s seemed to be a combination of schools of growth and giant enrollment machines at the same time, where there was a lot of pressure put on you to bring guys in and recruit men. I never wanted that for our brotherhood. I wanted it to, if it was going to happen, I wanted it to happen spontaneously. And it appears to be happening that way spontaneously, so that part is great. I don't want guys thinking that they're in a community that is, ultimately its only purpose is to serve as a recruitment machine for other men or to serve some, man behind the curtain who's benefiting from the whole thing. That's not what this is about. The other thing I would say is that the idea of a samurai brotherhood is unique for Western men. Now, I had history training in martial arts when I was younger. I trained in Shito Ryo Karate and Wing Chun Kung Fu, later years in Qigong and Tai Chi. I'm no master of any of those disciplines, but I trained in them extensively, especially when I was younger. So I had an admiration for the Asian fighting systems, as well as studied under some Buddhist teachers for a number of times as well, in the Zen, Tibetan, and the Hinayana traditions. So the idea of the samurai, I think, in the 20 years that I've been using this word, I've only ever been accused once of cultural appropriation by a woman, interestingly enough, and it was through an email, but it wasn't a heavy-duty accusation. She was more just suggesting, isn't this cultural appropriation? So by and large, the support has been quite positive for the term. In fact, it's more of we use it more of a gesture, gesture of respect. When I was starting it, I remember thinking between Knights Templar, Samurai Brotherhood, but Knights Templar, they didn't marry, right? The Crusaders, there was samurai married, which was a more appropriate model. But the admiration for the three qualities that they embodied of courage, loyalty, and aesthetics, right? So courage, forward direction, loyalty to a cause. In those days, it was loyalty to an overlord or a master or a captain. It's different now. Now it's more loyalty to a principle, right? The principle of the awakened man. And then aesthetics. The samurai were renowned for, their artistic warrior gear, or playing their bamboo flute and writing haiku poetry in the forest after fighting a battle, right? I mean, some of this is sort of like embellished stereotype, but that's the idea anyway, to combine creativity with boldness and loyalty to a cause, right? So Samurai Brotherhood combines all that, also reflects obviously the background of its founder, which is myself in this case, and I have been a very thorough seeker in my life, so I've always been interested in personal transformation. Socrates examined life above all else, and hence point number 2 of our 14-point code for man to have a sadhana, a personal practice of work on himself, whether meditation or psychotherapy or something to go along with all the other principles of warriorhood and men's work. So I've always sought to bring a lot of pieces together, and at 58 years of age, there's over 30 years of seeking behind me. So that's reflected in the template of our brotherhood, right, what it stands for. As I was saying at our tribal gathering last week, I don't want to see it, certainly on my watch for as long as I'm running this, I never want to see this become a group where we apologize for being men. So it's not about faulting ourselves, but nor is it about being blind to all the other levels of sensitivity that a truly developed man should have, right? A masculine core, the capacity for empathy for others, not being threatened by the feminine, being really mindful of the instinct towards competitiveness with other men, healing the wound with the father, helping younger men in his life, and so on, right? So I would say these are all part of what make our community unique. And not to mention, we've attracted an extraordinary core of guys, right? And like you guys, right? Committed young men that are, captaining our squads, and yeah, the sky's the limit.
On something you said earlier about the intents and purpose of sharing ground, getting together, we were talking about an insight I personally had of getting something that you've said a lot of.
Yeah.
Personal development is not the chief objective here. That can be a part of it, but the objective is sharing company and sharing your mind. So I was curious if you could speak on that and what the purpose and the outcomes are of being in that format together ultimately.
Yeah, so one of the first things that's understood about transformational work is that the idea of the transformation part is a bit of an illusion in some respects. So when people get involved in personal growth, especially with men, when they get involved in men's communities, a fair percentage of them are there because their woman thinks they should be there, because the woman thinks they need to improve themselves as men, or they get an idea, they hear from some other guy that maybe I should improve myself as a man. So the guy gets involved, and one of the first things he begins to understand is the concept of self-improvement is itself faulty at its core. What we're really looking at is deep self-acceptance. So what does it mean for a man to make friends with himself, right? And in making friends with himself, then he has the ability to make friends with other men and with women and with his own family system. But first he needs to make friends with himself. That means he needs to become comfortable with all the aspects of himself, including his masculinity or his fear of his masculinity or whatever that might be. Or if he identifies with being a weak man, he needs to be comfortable with or be able to confess the reality of that, right? So we're not in the business of shaming each other, right? But we do get down to at times confronting a guy or challenging him or holding his feet to the fire if it seems that he's very shifty and dodgy and very sophisticated in his strategies of not accepting himself, right? If he comes into a group, for example, just to boast about what he has and who he is, these guys don't last very long. Or if the opposite, if he's saddled with this self-loathing sort of tendency, right? He's constantly making himself wrong. He needs to be called out on that as well over time. But eventually he gets to the point where he realizes that this is all just about deep self-acceptance, accepting his father, which is not the same thing as blind forgiveness. That's not what we're talking about. But understanding his father, his brothers, the men in his life, accepting himself. And in doing that, then he can share ground with other men. And that speaks to the insight you were having, right, in the retreat, where you're sitting together with men and you're sharing being, right? They have a term for that in Sanskrit, satsang. Sat meaning truth, sangha meaning fellowship. Satsanga, the fellowship of truth. What does it mean to sit in the fellowship, in the company of truth? Not necessarily the supreme absolute truth, but here just the ground of being of the masculine core, right? What does it mean for men to share company with each other? And men are not always so good at that because we tend to get together over objects, right? To talk about business, talk about accomplishments, sports, women, whatever it is, but there needs to be an object for men to get together. And the notion of, say, imagine a group of Plains Indian warriors sitting together in a sweat lodge, sharing space with each other before they go to battle with each other and unburdening their hearts and cleansing their souls in that way in the heat. And ultimately what they're really doing is just sharing ground with each other. So it's also said sometimes the mark of a good friend is someone that you can be comfortably silent with. You're walking with them to the beach and you don't have to fill up the space with the air with words, right? This is very true for men when they're together, and you understand what it is when you're like in a group for a while and you actually look forward to seeing your group mates. You don't have to say a whole lot. It's just the mere presence with each other is enjoyed automatically. So that's the object. You could say if there is an object, if there's a goal, that's the goal, to get to that place of, it's a type of resting, inwardly resting in being comfortable within one's own skin as a man.